Right on.
All right, last one, Matt.
Last one. Last but not least, Kate Bush with The Kick Inside. This comes in at number 130 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums, number 8 in 1978, number 553 of all time. It's Kate Bush's third highest ranked album on Best Ever Albums. We are going to be covering the other two in the 1980s, so hang on for that. And this album did not come out on Rolling Stone, so not listed on Rolling Stone's list there. And John, are you up first here?
I am up first, and
yep.
God, is this a good album. Oh my goodness. Best album of the week, and I liked a lot of them this week. I am certain, I shouldn't say this. I'm pretty certain I may be the only one of the three of us that likes this album, but I love this album. Now, I am familiar with multiple songs on this album. I'm familiar with Wuthering Heights is the big song off this album. Mm-hmm. Strange Phenomena is another song off this album that's a big hit. There is something about Kate Bush that I find, like, I immediately connect with her music. I am always interested in her sonic choices and the way they come together. I just think she creates a very interesting soundscape that at times like cascades over you. It challenges you, and then at sometimes can be very melodic and soothes you. And just as soon as you get into any of those things, she veers along the way. Her voice is unique. You know it's Kate Bush immediately. Like, there's other people who kind of like, Tori Amos comes to mind, right? That kind of tries to do a little bit of the same stylings, I'd say, in terms of the sound, but no one really sounds quite like Kate Bush, right? And just the art rock mixed with the Kate Bush is sort of the I look at her as like the successor to like what Laura Nyro was doing in the late 60s, right? I think that's where it started. But what she did was she took the Laura Nyro and added more art rock and took it into where the late 70s were. I think when it was easier, there'd been reps had been done, right, to make it so that you could be a female singer-songwriter in an easier way. You don't have a Kate Bush, I think, equally without, even though she doesn't sound like Carole King, right? Carole King made it viable, and then people like Linda Ronstadt, Carly Simon, the confessional stuff and writing about relationships and sex and relationships, which is on here, by the way, that Kate Bush is writing about quite a bit. Yep. So they're doing that, but she doesn't really sound like them. She's more Laura Nyro mixed with Peter Gabriel sound. You know, it's kind of like if you took Laura Nyro and you mixed it with like Prague and Peter Gabriel, that's kind of where you're getting. But I really sonically like the sound of her album. I know she was insanely young when she released this. I want to say she was like 19 years old when she released this, which makes it even more interesting. Yeah, she I'm looking right now. It was released when she was 19. I just looked. When she was 19, but she wrote some of these songs when she was 15 and recorded some of these at 16. Wow. I mean, you get it though, because like what she's writing about, if you know the context of writing as a teenager, right? Like you can kind of like The Man with the Child in His Eyes, right? That one, you can see it quite a bit. Wuthering Heights also can easily be repurposed that way if you knew, but the complex, maybe. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the complexity of her song crafting is remarkable, and I mean I know Kate Bush is like an artist too, right? There's artists, and it's not even one I know. The one who comes up all the time now is like Big Boy from Outkast, like loves Kate Bush, right? He mentions it all the time, but he's not alone. There's a ton of people. I grew up listening to a lot of Kate Bush because it was an artist that both my mom and dad loved equally, and really like they could put it on. I could hear it from either of them in the car, and there were very few artists that like would be first choice artists that both of my parents would go to. This leads into, you know, the 80s, the people like Suzanne Vega and stuff like that, or PJ Harvey, right? You know, they don't sound exactly the same, but there's elements of what was laid down here that was there. I mentioned Tori Amos later, that's there. But yeah, I can expand on this more, and I will. But I love this album. Easy re-listenability to me. Not only is it like ahead of its time and a real artistic endeavor, but it's just it's a challenging album, but in all the good ways. Because it's a challenging album that makes me always want to go back more, and I always can peel back another layer whenever I listen to Kate Bush's stuff. So strong recommend for me.
So I didn't know any of this. I knew of Kate Bush. She's always kind of one of those artists that's just I've known of in the ether. I've always known that she's been very highly regarded. I couldn't, before this, I still don't know if I could pick her out of a lineup. Like she just kind of, I'm not even sure exactly what she looks like, even after seeing some pictures of her. I'm mixed on this. This was this requires more listening. I mean, I can't just get understand this in one listen. I definitely, I'm very much impressed that she wrote this at such a young age. There's a lot of stuff going on here. This was, some of the stuff was, I found a little show tune like, kind of the songs that are a little bit more of just the kind of, there's some songs in here that are just basically just piano driven. They're kind of just like, I don't want to say like it's a ballad, but it's like a slower kind of piano driven song that has some dramatic kind of parts to it. Like The Man with a Child in His Eyes is an example of that. But she also does some stuff that's got, I found that Kite had a little bit of more of a funky reggae beat kind of thing going on, so she's throwing some different genres in there. This was interesting because she would take songs in directions that I would not expect them to go. She would kind of hone in on something a little bit, and then she would do something, throw some other chord progressions or notes in there. And I was like, oh, okay, wasn't expecting that, so there's definitely that kind of like experimental art, indie rock kind of nature to this. That's just keeps you on your toes. Right. So I was kind of, switching gears, finding myself trying to switch gears, in the middle of some of the songs to try to figure out what was going on. So because of that, it just, when I hear an album like this, that's got these types of songs, it's hard to really know how I feel about it. And I think it requires, more listens. So I would say, yes, Tori Amos is definitely the artist that stood out here the most. Some of this stuff is not, kind of the typical, in line with a typical sound that I gravitate towards. There's definitely, a lot of minor keys. It's very melancholy at times, and some sort of depressing sonic undertones that she has. The vocals, I could see how some people might find that off-putting. I didn't find it too bad. There is certainly a distinct vocalization style that she's got with a high-pitched nature of some of the notes that she's hitting. So I was okay with that overall, but I could see how some people might not totally be in love with it. It's not a traditional vocal style that she has. So I think that this could get better with repeated listenings, and I like there's elements of here like Wuthering Heights, which there's like really cool guitar solo towards the end. That was a cool addition to it. There's some interesting syncopation, the stuff that she's doing with the rhythm. There's synths in here that can sometimes be bouncy. So lots of stuff going on. Hard to kind of say definitely I loved. I wouldn't say that I loved it, but I was interested and intrigued by it. I didn't know what. I guess this kind of was what I was expecting in some way, even though I didn't know exactly what I was going to be getting. But a lot of variety on here, and I think I need a little bit more time with this to kind of really tell how I feel. So, I'm in the middle.
Yeah, I'm similar to Matt. Kate Bush is one of those people that I know by name, but has never really entered my orbit, or I didn't sought out. But she's clearly the next generation of Joni Mitchell, Laura Nyro, and those singer-songwriters we talked about in the 60s. And you can't have Kate Bush, I feel like, with you can't have Fiona Apple and Joanna Newsom and some of those people without having Kate Bush. I feel like there's a clear line of people there. Those are the people that I kind of sound most familiar with. She's definitely piano driven, artist. I feel like there's a full sound to this album. It's like a surprisingly rich production. I feel like there's lots of orchestration. There's multiple instruments. There's a lot of layering and multiple voices too at time. I feel like it was a very impressive album from that aspect. I think her lyrics are really good as well. She has very poetic lyrics. I was reading them as I was listening to the album. Her voice does take a little bit of getting used to, but it's not off-putting in the way that the Pere Ubu singer's voice is, for contrast. It's just a very feminine sounding voice, and it perfectly fits in with the music that she's doing. She's very ethereal sounding. She's kind of got like shades of Bjork too, I feel like, in terms of like this flighty kind of pixie-ish quality. That's how I picture her in my head, not knowing what she looks like. And I think the other reason I know Kate Bush is because her 80s album is always like very highly regarded, or one of her 80s albums. And
multiple Hounds of Love is probably her most famous one, but there's others too.
That's always up there on like the top 10 list of 80s albums. Or,
Hounds of Love might have made the top 50 in Rolling Stone, I think.
See? And so I didn't know this album. I did know Wuthering Heights. I heard that song before, somewhere along the way. But
by the way, if you want to see one of the more impressive like influence and legacy pages of an artist, Kate Bush has an ridiculous one. It's like a who's who of everybody, it seems like, who's there. And I know that I don't like somebody just because other people like. It just so happens that it falls into my taste right here. But even if you were not a fan, you would have to be impressed by who's quoted.
That's not surprising.
And coincidentally, she was in the nominees list for the 2022 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year for the first time. So
how about that?
It's definitely it's well deserved. I'm intrigued. There was something about this album that was lacking for me. I don't respond to it emotionally in the same way that John does. Or I think because also you had that exposure too that I didn't have.
I don't think either of my parents know who Kate Bush is at all. So
the cold listen hot take is not an ideal format for a Kate Bush album. Let me put it that way. I would almost be certain that if you listen to this album one or two more times, it would grow on you, and you'd unlock some peace. I can't say for sure, and I don't want to speak for either of you guys, but I do feel more so than most albums there. It's one that I think a second listen and a third listen would unlock some of the keys. I think it was like I'm trying to look right here, and I see it. The quote I always think about, Tricky, the trip hop artist in the 90s. He
Massive
said,
Attack guy.
Yeah. He said, her music has always sounded like dreamland to me. I don't believe in God, but if I did, her music would be my Bible. And I always thought that was a very good quote because it does have this ethereal quality to it. Her music,
sure.
As Josh said, the fullness and the richness, the soundscape idea, that is sort of the Kate Bush sounds, the lush soundscape, and So, I love this one. This is high. This will be high on my list of albums from the 70s.
Did you hear this album first, or was it just kind of all different Kate Bush at the same time?
I mean, when I was first listening to Kate Bush, I think it was The Sensual World that my mom was playing, because it would have been around when I was 9 or 10, and I know that was like her, well, at the time, her comeback. I mean, Kate Bush is one of these people who she's sort of, she'll show up, every once in a while, then she'll disappear, and then she'll show up, and there's sort of like a mysterious quality to her. But yeah, that would have been the first I heard, Sensual World, in like 88 or 89. I'm laughing at this quote, by the way, where Robert Smith of The Cure said that Sensual World was his favorite single of 89. And when they asked him for his favorite albums of the 80s, he put all of Kate Bush. But anyway, but yeah, that was where I came, and then of course I liked it. So then I think I remember telling my mom that I liked it, and she was like, "Oh, I've got other Kate Bush albums," and so that was how Hounds of Love came on, and then it was that, and then it was like, okay, let's work all the way backwards, and then eventually you get to this, and I quickly realized I like all this. And I think it was sort of that dreamlike quality that really sucked me in, and just the fact that it would be on the car at different times, and every time it came on, I got interested, and so.
Yeah, that combination right in the middle of Wuthering Heights and James and the Colt Gun, I think that's a one really good combo of songs there, and I can tell she has talent, and I'm interested to kind of hear some of her other work as well.
Well, we'll be revisiting her 2 more times in the 80s, so you'll get a little bit more of a taste.